Hello everyone, my name is Josh and this is WHIMs Dead Musings, and today I'm going to be talking about the second episode of the television series Dead Ringers. Now this episode, following on from the last episode, pretty much focuses on Beverly and Genevieve, the actress's relationship. At the end of that episode, they start beginning a relationship, and it's at this point that Genevieve finds out that Beverly is in fact a twin. And right off the bat, they don't waste any time with the misunderstanding. They don't have, they don't have the falling out. They basically just, she says, "Oh, you never told me your sister was a twin." She goes, "Oh, I literally forgot she existed there for a second." And Genevieve literally comes right out and says it and says, "You know what, was it you the whole time?" And literally, Beverly just says, "Yeah, it was me the whole time." And I like that. I like the fact that Genevieve is slightly smarter than Claire, in the sense that but then again, to Claire's credit, in the time in which the original film is set, you don't have Google, you don't have, ways of finding out these things. Whereas, of course, the only time when you probably would find out something about that would be when you go to have dinner with someone, like if you're having a dinner party or you're at a public event where you're kind of with everybody and everyone's talking and says, "Have you heard about the Mantle twins?" and all that or thing. Like they'll bring it up there. Whereas here, Genevieve doesn't have the excuse. She could have very easily Googled these two doctors, but then again, they're not famous, so of course they probably wouldn't, be as well known or probably as well searched, well founded in the research area. So that's actually very interesting. But the real emotional weight of this episode comes on the heels of Beverly and Eliot needing to seek a grant from a group of people called the Parkers, who are essentially these upper class, kind of hippie inspired or hippie wannabe type people who live in their luxury apartments on the cliffs, and they have special fair use wines or inorganic milk or whatever, and they basically sit around at the table. Their children sing songs like Imagine by John Lennon and things like that. Like they really are the pure definition of a pretentious household. And I found myself thinking, honestly, I just wanted to get out of there, because honestly, if I was in that environment, I'd just say, I don't like these people. I think they're obnoxious, they're cruel, they're two-faced, they're mean. And that's the big thing that I will definitely say about this particular show, is they really don't shy away from saying, you know what, these people are assholes and these people will exploit anybody else. But what's very interesting is the characters who we would think we'd find more morally reprehensible, which would have been the Mantle twins if we're talking about the original film. It turns out that these guys are more immoral than the Mantle twins are, because honestly, at least the Mantle twins are coming from humble beginnings and they're trying to basically set up their own practice where they want to specialise in birthing and, fetus development and things like that. So there's a lot of passion and a lot of drive into what they do. They want this practice because they want to stand on their own 2 feet. They don't want to work at a hospital all the time. And that's the big difference between the show and the film, is that the show pretty much establishes them, working their way up the ladder. They're at the local hospital in New York and they're trying to, give birth, help these mothers give birth and, support them in any way they can. They're doing consultations and things like that. But then it kind of, goes off into, that they want money for their own practice, but it doesn't feel like it's trying to rush that storyline element. They really do like taking their time with fleshing out these details and really giving you an insight into what's going on. Like, what was the opioid crisis that, Rebecca Parker was known for? Why does everyone hate her, kind of thing? And that's the big mystery throughout the course of that particular episode, is what was it? What happened? And the answer comes from the point of view of her niece, which is that my grandfather sold a product and it was a dud. And it was one of those things where, people died, people lost their lives, we lost money. But you know what? It was a minor setback and we were able to bounce back. And that's one of the things that I really didn't like about both the Parkers as a unit, is they just kind of didn't care about the fact that they lost They were responsible for losing tons of lives. This isn't just simply, property damage or anything like that, where it's easily replaceable with it if you pay the right funds. This is human life, where if you do that sort of stuff, there is going to be massive consequences. So you can pretty much tell that them undergoing this deal with the Parkers is probably going to have a very strange effect on their careers. So the Mantle twins are very hesitant to go into this. Eliot's very kind of, gung-ho about it. She says things like, aren't the Parkers pure fucking evil or something? And things like that. Whereas, Beverly's actually, I love the scene in the car where Beverly's on the phone to her agent, her PR agent, John, and he's basically doing what most people would do in these American upper class functions, with a PR student who the PR representative will often say, oh, this person's name is this, he's related to this person and his profession's this, and he's interested in doing this, that, and the other. And Beverly is very attentive, that she really is trying to listen in on what's going on. That she says, oh, okay, this person's in robotics, this person's in bioengineering, whatever that means, and things like that. And Eliot's just basically saying, oh, well, this is bloody, annoying. Like, don't you find Genevieve completely and utterly a faker when it comes to how she enjoys stuff with you, Beverly? Like, don't you see it? Like, it's awful, isn't it? And she's constantly, trying to distract her and things like that. And she goes, oh, cute, did you make this pie chart all by yourself? You've got graphs and everything. And it really is the pure definition of annoying, but I kind of find that annoyance a little bit, hilarious. And that's what's really great about Rachel Weisz playing these two characters, is she does play them differently, kind of like Jeremy Irons. She does have, a very unique way of approaching the topic, the way she plays these two twins. What I like about Eliot is she is, even though she's the oldest one, she's older by a few minutes, she is quite emotionally immature, and that comes into play when it comes to the separation with Beverly and Genevieve going off and having their relationship, and Eliot being left to essentially, hold the fort, essentially. And I like the fact that in the original, you knew what Eliot was like. You knew that he was the more suave and charming and very kind of seethingly, openly, upfront and sexual and lively and things like that. And he was also kind of manipulative, but he had a degree of care for his brother, and he also cared about the practice that he ran. And I think that was something that was really wonderful about that interpretation of the character. But he could also be, someone who is very kind of, he shrugs it off and he says, well, during the iconic scene in the original where Beverly comes to his practice and he just basically cries and he talks about Claire Neville, he says, in that wonderful way that Jeremy Irons does, that endeared me to him a lot, was when he says, in sort of like a tearful stupor, I'm in love with her. And he goes, well, it can't be love if it does this to you, does it, Bevy, and things like that. And I love that little nonchalant glance. He even pats him on the shoulder and says, it can't be love if it does this to you, does it, Bevy, and things like that. And it's kind of the same with this version of Eliot, except Eliot is more... She's more the type of person that if you invited her to a party or a private function, if you invited her to a party and you were introducing her to your family, you'd be like, you'd want to watch her with the alcohol, because honestly, she would just spell out stuff, and she'd say, oh, you're that guy who did this, or you're that guy who did this, that's very controversial, aren't you? Lucky, what's it like? And things like that, and you're just kind of thinking, Eliot, shut up, shut up, shut up. And I love that dynamic, and I like the fact that Eliot, when she's explaining a very personal childhood memory to that's between the both of them, she actually covers the phone. She puts the phone on her chest because she's saying very explicit things, which I won't repeat here because it's YouTube. But yes, I do really like that entire exchange because it really shows the humour, and it really shows that, Alice Birch and her team of writers, and of course Rachel Weisz herself with giving the performance, did a very good job in really kind of selling the fact that these two are very dysfunctional. Yes, they are very in sync and they know what they want, but in many ways they're also very haphazardly all over the place as people. But yeah, this episode is pretty good. I also want to draw attention to the fact that all of the scenes where they're at the party is absolutely insane. The scene where Eliot catches the eye of a Korean investor who specialises in VR and things like that. That entire relationship just came out of nowhere. Like, there's a scene where they're playing this game where they have to basically hide various people in various different places, and there are a group of winners and there are a group of losers. And if you win, you basically win a lot of money, or you win, a treat or a snack or something. But what's very interesting is that during this entire insanity, it's basically victim. It's set up at the very start of the episode when they're having the dinner, and Eliot gets a car and says, "Oh, Beverly Mantle is your victim. You've got to hide her into a location. You've got to keep her there for a certain number of time, and if she tries to get away, you lose points," or something along those lines. And that's a really fun sequence. There's even a sequence where Beverly tries to have sex with the Korean VR technologies entrepreneur, and she makes his translator watch. That was such a very weird sequence. And yeah, that was a thing that happened in this show. But yeah, I really do like that entire setup, and I like the fact that Beverly loses her shit after she quote unquote wins the game, and she basically says, "I don't really care if you spend a crap load of money on us. I'm not going to accept your money. I'm not going to accept your offer because I'm not going to degrade myself to this level. I really am passionate," and things like that. And I really do like the fact that she is basically speaking the truth. She's been completely truthful, whereas with Eliot, she always likes to pepper in these little fanciful notions, like when they're talking about the menopause. Beverly's basically not giving them an answer. Like, she doesn't know how to respond to it. She doesn't know how to deal with her audience when they keep throwing these questions. The Parkers keep throwing these questions at her. She's constantly being taken off guard, whereas Eliot is trying to pick them up and say, "I want this offer as well, so we're going to try our best to answer this question as best we can." And and she says things like, "We'll be experimenting, we'll be trying all sorts of different things to figure out how we can remove the menopause," because they have this theory that if they remove the gene chromosome from a woman of 20 years, if they remove a special gene from a woman at the age of 20, when they get to the age of 40 and the onset of menopause is starting to kick in, they can have that gene automatically re-embedded into the person, and those menopausal rates are going to be dissolved and reduced by about 20 years. So they'll feel invigorated and they'll feel young again, even though technically they're still in their 40s. And I found that such a very weird and very alien concept to me. Like, how could you reverse the menopause? Like, that's something that just feels, that's like trying to reverse puberty. It just feels like a very bog standard aspect of development in people. And I just think, if you are going to reverse something, but then again, it's kind of like saying, the menopause is like aging in general, or like, puberty in women, where it just feels like a very natural progression from one thing to the other. But it isn't something, it's something that I'm sure a lot of women doesn't want to go through. But I think what's very interesting is that they completely and utterly sell it to the Parkers. And what's very interesting is that no one really cares about the horrible moral implications of what they've done with the opioid crisis and things like that. But I want to hear the grittier details, like what was the product about, what did it do, and how did it, affect people. And that's one of the things that I really do like about this episode, is they really do keep certain things a mystery, and they deliberately do that to really kind of give you that sense of, okay, what is this? I want to know what's going to happen, so you have to tune into the next episode to find out how it happens. But I like how they keep the focus on certain things depending on what episode it is. Like, the first episode does what all pilots should do, which is they set up the central, themes and ideas and, presentation of the show. Like, what's it going to look like? Who's it going to be starring? And all the rest of it. What's it going to be about? How are these characters going to progress from one stage of their lives to another? And they do it very well in the pilot episode. And in this episode, they're progressing the plot along. And they're also introducing the central conflict of the episode, which is that, Beverly is moving on. She's flying the nest, and Eliot is kind of left stuck in a rut, and she's left, stuck in her own ways. And that's a very interesting idea. And I'm going to talk about this in the third episode, but I think what's very interesting is that Like I said, Eliot is a much more emotionally immature person. Even though she's the oldest, she has kind of like a behaviour that really is kind of reminiscent of someone who really does kind of don't know how to handle their emotions, kind of thing. And it's a very well structured relationship, and I like the fact that in in this version, excuse me, in this version, it seems like Eliot's the one who's going on the downward spiral, whereas in the original, it's Beverly with his relationship with Claire. And what I really like about it is that it really does kind of show that Eliot isn't in control. She likes to pretend that she's in control, but she really isn't. She has a lot of issues. She has a lot of things going on. But what's very fascinating is while this entire party is going on, this maid of theirs named Greta is basically picking up samples of the Mantle twins, like hair in the bathtub, various, private things that they have been using in the bathroom, out of the bathroom bin, and putting them into sample sacks and taking them somewhere anonymous. And she's even been taking the tapes that their mother has been leaving on their answering machine and basically erasing the message and keeping the recorded tapes, keeping them on the recorded tapes, taking the tapes, and then basically, deleting the message. And that I find very interesting. Like, what's her game in all this? What's she after? Is she an agent of the Parkers? Are they trying to examine the Mantle twins further? But why would they need samples of the Mantle twins? Like, what's going on there? Is it basically a means of personal gain? Like, is it kind of like a black market interest? Like, is there something very weird about, the idea of them taking DNA from twins or popular gynecology, twins or whatever? What's going on there? And that's one of the things that I really do love, is it knows how to implant little clues so that you are basically very intrigued about where it's going to go. Like, I was even chatting about this with a friend of mine, where we were basically talking about what was the significance of the animal fetuses, like the misshapen animal fetuses in the glass casements in the trailer. What was that all about? And in the preview for the next episode, we realise that it's basically only a sample case for how they're going to develop uteruses in the womb without having to rely on an incubation chamber of a womb in order to grow that baby if it's ever premature or anything like that. So that's very interesting. But what I just think it really adds so much, and the fact that the parents are addressed in this version really is quite an interesting idea, and the fact that these characters don't really feel at all connected to each other really is quite wonderful, and how they're starting to feel that they're separating, they're going off in their own directions. But Eliot has her life together. She knows what she wants, and she knows how she's going to get it. But she feels like with her going to his practice and having to undergo this process of having to share the name of her practice with another investor, really goes to show that she really is she has her head screwed on straight, but there's a part of her that is really desperate as well. Like, she knows that these people are bad news, but she also at the same time wants to have this job so badly that she's willing to do anything. And it kind of plays into a very topical thing in our culture and society today, with the idea of the Me Too movement. But here's the funny thing, the investor is also a woman, so the fact that these women are kind of manipulating each other, and the fact she's manipulating her in order to say, oh, you had this vehicle, but I want to turn that to cash, I want to make a shit ton of money with you, and if you decline my offer, I don't want to see any of you again. And that, I think, is very interesting, is that she completely actually holds the cards to her chest. But they know that these guys are bad news, so how are they going to deal with that? Well, that's all going to be a matter for the next episode. So tune into that when I'll eventually record that. Hopefully we'll record that at some point today, maybe later on this evening. But yeah, I really enjoyed this episode a whole lot. Now, before I sign off on this episode, I want to mention very quickly the music in this particular show. And I've seen it, I've been watching 3 episodes so far, and I've been going back and watching the episodes twice each time. And the music is very interesting, and I like the fact that in the opening episode for the first episode, we have a model of the Mantle Parker practice, and it has all these little model people doing the birthing procedures, going into the consultation rooms, and basically showing the practice in a very kind of expanded way, whilst the song Sweet Dreams are made of these. And I think it's very interesting that there's a model of the practice as we're going to go and see it in later series, in later episodes, excuse me. And I really do like the fact that there is a emphasis on the music there. The song of Sweet Dreams Are Made of These by the Symphonics, and the Symphonics, and I think that's really interesting because the whole entire idea is it is basically a dream at this point. It's just a pipe dream. We haven't actually quite made that to tuition, and we're going to, you know, make it a reality at some point in the future. It may not be today, it may not be tomorrow, but it will be someday. And that I think is very interesting. But then, of course, the ending song is Think Twice by Celine Dion, which is a love song about, you know, feeling separate from your lover, but also feeling more entwined. So it feels like it's very reminiscent of Beverly and Eliot's relationship, and also the idea, the hint that, you know, they've known each other for a very long time, they've shared everything for a very long time, and now because of this relationship that Beverly is in, everything is suddenly changing. Things are changing for the better, and some things are changing for the worst. And I like that idea that the music is hinting at those things, and there's various other hints of, you know, this sort of music happening in other episodes. Let's say, for example, in the at the end of the second episode, the song Tainted Love is playing, and it really kind of, you know, does a very good job of kind of highlighting the very toxic relationship between Beverly and Eliot, but then also describes a very toxic relationship of, you know, investor and, you know, the you know, people behind the business, and how people can often sell their souls to causes that they're very passionate about in the name of some kind of tainted love. So that really kind of, it kind of has a double meaning to it in a way as well. And I like the fact that they are hinting at the Me Too movement, with Rebecca Parker kind of being sort of like their version of Harvey Weinstein, where they kind of, you know, say, well, if you do something for me, I'll do something for you, but except that it's not sexual favours this time. It's basically just them doing their fucking jobs, as she says. But I think that's that's kind of equally toxic, in my opinion. Like the idea that they don't really care about, you know, well, if people are mad at them, it's just going to be part of the course for me. But you have to kind of, you know, worry about yourselves, and you need to worry about the practice as well. But she's not doing it because she cares. She's doing it because she wants to control them. It's like that idea of you pretend that you're, when people in certain psychological circles say, you know, oh, I'm actually thinking about you when I'm saying this, they're actually doing it to say things like, oh, it's basically a means of control. It's like when they offer you food in, when people offer you food in certain circles, or certain, like in The Walking Dead, there's a theme and a motif where certain factions of survivors would exchange food with Rick's group so that they can, you know, probe them for information, and that's just basically a means of control. And it's the same thing here, where if they give them the money is the power item here, and ideas and all these other things in Dead Ringers, of course, to bring it back on track. And because they have the money, they can basically, they're puppets almost, that they can do anything they want with them now. They can make sure that anything else happens. And it's that kind of quid pro quo kind of manipulation tactic that really is going to be an interesting development as the series goes on. And I really do, even though it doesn't really matter if they do or they don't, I really want the Parkers to be punished for what they did, because I feel like organisations like this exist in real life as well, where they try to remove responsibility or complicity in certain horrible actions. And I really do hope that in this fictional sort of fictional telling of a real life, you know, tragedy, we do get, you know, this insight into a little bit of redemption, a little bit of you know, justice. So I hope they do get punished for it, because honestly, this is terrible. The fact that they've kind of, you know, been responsible for the deaths of those people, and they just kind of don't care. They just kind of shrug it off and say, oh, we lost money, it was a massive, you know, setback, but we can, you know, bounce back. It's kind of like that line in RoboCop where when the Ed 209 kills one of the board members accidentally after a test demonstration goes wrong, Dick says, oh, it was just a glitch, just a minor setback, and then the board of directors just stands up and goes, you call this a glitch, kind of thing. It's like, I feel like that board member in that scene when I watch the Parker scenes. Like, I'm just thinking to myself, you guys are just so corrupt, aren't you? Like, you pretend like you're very free-spirited with your low-fat yogurts and your herbal teas and things like that, but in reality you're just as corrupt as the big money suits and tech corporate guys. Like, you're just as worse as they are. You're worse as the Mark Zuckerbergs almost, who are only thinking about their brand and their product and seeing the future and seeing big things. Whereas, you know, some people get, you know, affected by these decisions that you make, and it really is an interesting thing to talk about. But yeah, that's my thoughts on the second episode of Dead Ringers, and let me know in the comments what you thought of this episode. Did you think it was a good one? Did you think it was a good follow-up? And what do you think about this direction that the show's going in? Are you a fan of it, or do you feel like it should focus more on the Mantle twins? But yeah, I'm really enjoying it so far, and let me know your thoughts in the comments. And this has been Josh from WHIMs Dead Ringers Interesting Musings. Take care, bye-bye for now. I hope you're all doing very well, and bye-bye.